Hey. Time for another out-of-this-world story from rSpace. You think you've seen it all, until the other guy shows up thinking he's some kind of honor-bound knight, ready to defend a woman who's been cheating behind your back for years. Today on rSpace, is chivalry really dead? Let's find out. Wife's loser affair partner told me to let her go. I took his advice and pushed their buttons until they ended up in jail. Despite the fact that I read posts here more than almost any other section of this website, I somehow couldn't slow things down enough for me to come and narrate what was happening in my life while it was still happening. At this point, it's all over, so some of the earlier events aren't as vivid, but the good thing is that I'll be able to get the entire story out without needing a single update. So I'll say that's the silver lining here. Needless to say, this is about a cheating wife who is now an ex-wife, so I'm very thankful for that. I'm 37 years old now, but at the time this was happening, I was still 36. My ex-wife was 35. As much as I want to be one of those people who come here to say that everything was happy and smooth in our marriage, it wasn't. We were married for 7 years before this whole thing went down, and we had dated for a couple of years before that. I think things really started deteriorating about 3 or 4 years into the marriage. I'm not entirely sure why. I lost my job around that time, and that was what I initially chalked it up to, because she ended up being the sole source of income for our household. But within 6 months, I had gotten employed in a very good role, and since that point, things were comfortable. The problem was that change in her attitude never seemed to leave, which is why I'm not sure if it was that temporary period that I was unemployed that caused all this. I tried to talk to her about it, but each time she never had anything useful to say, so I essentially just gave up on trying to figure out what the issue was. I won't quite say that she was cold, but she was very uninterested in most things that had to do with me. Initially, when I tried to sort out a date night, she'd bring up some excuse or another. After a while, she didn't bother with the excuses anymore. She'd just say that she wasn't in the mood, or that we could do it some other time. If I came back to tell her about some major win at work, she wouldn't be as happy as I expected her to be, especially compared to the person she was, who would celebrate with me before she was changed. Needless to say, life in the bedroom essentially died. In the last 6 months before we finally divorced, I'm sure we slept together just once. The only time I'd see a glimpse of the person she used to be was with our kids. We have 2 kids together, both under 10. It was baffling to me because they always say that communication is key. Before the change, I was good at communicating. After the change, I was still communicating, trying to figure out what was wrong, but nothing worked. At a point, I assumed that she had given up on us, so I started to let go too. The thing is, because our kids were in the mix, I still had a little glimmer of hope in me that we could make things work. I grew up in a broken home, and I thought that I was going to save my children from that fate. There's only so much you can do, to be honest. Even today, I'm not sure whether she stopped caring for me because there was someone else, or if she searched out someone else because she stopped caring for me. I think it is more of the latter, because if she had been keeping an affair from me for over 3 years, I was taken for a fool quite successfully. It might have been the case. I'll never know. But the only reason I ever found out about the affair she was having was because her affair partner came out with it. It started when I had finally given up trying to make things work, and I brought up a divorce. She didn't seem fazed by it, and the most notable thing I remember her saying was, "If you think that's the way, that's fine." I don't think I can express how much it hurts to know that the person you love and the person who's supposed to be in love with you has given up on your relationship. She clearly didn't want to be there anymore. I'll admit that it made me mad. I flew off the handle, and I asked her why she wasn't even going to try. I asked her why she hadn't made an effort at any point, and why all the attempts at communicating what the issue was had been shot down. All she said was that it had nothing to do with me. I didn't need to bother. She didn't elaborate beyond that. I kept trying to get something out of her, but nothing was forthcoming. I became so passionate over that conversation that I told her that I was going to make sure we could work through things. It was like I had a second wind, and I wanted to try my best all over again. I didn't want to throw things away, and even though I knew that was the right move, that was when she told me that she wanted the divorce, that she didn't want to try. I remember how I felt in that moment. It's so hard to explain. I knew from her behavior that she was over us, but to exactly hear it, especially when I know that I didn't exactly do anything wrong, stung like hell. At that point, I just walked out. I wasn't going to just roll over and let the divorce happen, but I realized that I wasn't going to try either. It was about 2 weeks after that I got served with the divorce papers at work. It was very embarrassing for me, but I took it as well as one could, and I didn't make a big deal of it. However, I knew I wasn't going to sign it until the last minute. Her trying to get me to sign it was the most I had seen her naturally engage me in a long time. It was clear that she wanted me to sign it quickly, perhaps because she wanted to start to move on with her life. I asked her whether she had any concern for our children in the whole mess, but her reply was that they'd be better off with divorced parents rather than two parents who didn't love each other. I told her that wasn't the case for me. I loved her still. She was the one who stopped loving me for whatever reason it was. I gave her another chance to tell me what I had done wrong, but again, nothing. I made it clear that I wasn't going to sign until she told me what was going on, and her parting words were, "Just sign it, okay?" I didn't have any intention to sign it before the deadline, just as I've said, and I stuck to that. So about a week and some days after that, she came back, pretty fed up with me for not having done it. We didn't talk for as long that day, but she was clearly very pissed off, and there was a little bit of pleasure in me seeing her like that. Now, everything finally made sense about 2 days after that. I had just pulled into my parking spot at work when a truck pulled up behind me. I was confused as to what was going on, but I had already exited my car, and I was ready to act on a moment's notice. A man stepped out of the truck and walked up to me. He didn't come up to me in a threatening way, but I was still cautious. I remember that the first thing I tried to figure out was whether I had to cut someone off in traffic, and they had followed me all the way to work. He stayed a sensible distance away from me, and he smiled, though there was something that I didn't like about that smile. He said, "You don't know me, but I know you. I'm not here to cause any trouble, but I'm just going to tell you that you need to sign the papers that Marcia gave you. Let her go, man." The moment I heard her name, I flared up. I asked him who he was, and I was visibly angry because why was she sending people to threaten me? He laughed, and that pissed me off more. He said that I was smart enough to figure out who he was. He said she had chosen him over me, and there was no point in my continuing to waste her time. I walked up to him at that point and asked him who the F he thought he was, because he must have thought that I was a pushover and I'd just do whatever he said. I told him I'd sign the papers when I wanted to, and not because he came along trying to do a poor impression of a tough guy. He just laughed again, got in his truck, and left. I was so furious. I spent the entire day at work in a pretty foul mood. The worst part is that I know if he had chosen to pull that kind of crap at me at home, he would have regretted it. I'm sure that was part of the reason why he had chosen to stalk me to my workplace, which was either because he knew my house and followed me to work from there, or knew my workplace, and the only reason either of those would be true would be if he was in contact with my wife. It was obvious that he was her affair partner, and the fact that he pulled up on me like that didn't help. At that point, things started to make a lot more sense. She'd been cheating on me. It hurt, but it didn't hurt as much as I imagined that it would. Likely because I'd already checked out of the relationship. I had no idea how long it had been going on, and that was my only big concern because if it had been happening for years, it would explain why she had switched up on me. She had been biding her time, waiting for me to get fed up, and when I finally mentioned divorce, she jumped on the opportunity for us to finally end things so she could go and be with her new man. It was such a silly way for me to find out that my wife had been cheating on me. As soon as I got back home, I confronted Marcia. I asked her why she thought it was a good idea for her affair partner to come and threaten me at work. She clearly didn't know he had done that based on her reaction, so I guess he had decided to play Superman and defend his woman's honor. But despite her surprise, she defended him even before I gave her the full story. She didn't even try and act like her cheating was a bad thing. She didn't even try to deny that he was her affair partner. She simply didn't acknowledge it, and just went straight to saying that he must have felt like he could get to me if he talked man to man with me. I ignored that and asked her if she was really just going to let the fact that she had been cheating on me slide like that. She didn't say anything. I asked her for how long it had been going on, and she still didn't say anything. I shouted at her to answer me because I was getting really mad. I only toned things down after that because I remembered that the kids were in their room and I didn't want to scare them. But I was so mad at her. I knew that I could never have anything to do with her. She'd be the mother of my children, so I obviously couldn't get rid of her for good, but I knew I'd try to erase any memory of her from my life. So, I took her affair partner's advice and I signed the divorce papers right then and there. There was no point in me playing games anymore. The sooner the things ended, the better. I told her that we had to talk to the children about the situation. I pleaded with her on one thing, and that was that we'd both be mature parents. I admitted to her that I resented her, but I was not going to poison the children against her. And if the courts decided that she should have custody, I wouldn't do anything to frustrate that. She thought for a bit, which pissed me off, but she agreed. It wasn't something that she had to think about. We called the kids out and did our best to explain the situation to them. In that moment, with the way that we supported each other in gently explaining the divorce, it briefly felt like we were a family again. But ironically, we were speaking about us going our separate ways. Our older child understood, but seemed confused. The younger one cried because the only thing that they understood was that we weren't going to all be together again. We didn't bother covering the fact that their mother had a new man, so they'd have a stepdad in their lives. They'd find that out themselves, and she could bother with that explanation. I wasn't going to help. Anyway, the divorce process eventually started and I got a lawyer that was recommended to me by one of my colleagues. He was a great guy and explained the whole process of divorce to me pretty thoroughly. You never want to have to learn about divorce more than once. When we were negotiating, she and her lawyer proposed buying me out of my share of the house and keeping it. She wanted 50-50 custody, and she said that she would ask for only child support and no alimony. My lawyer said it was a good deal, considering that we likely wouldn't get much better if we went to trial. To be honest, I wanted to be stubborn so bad, I didn't want to make it easy for her. But he said he knew that the courts in our state, and he knew the family court judges. He said she'd probably end up getting everything she asked for, plus alimony. They'd side with her for sure, especially because they tended not to bend because of infidelity. I thought about it as much as I could, and ultimately, I realized that was the best way to go. I didn't want the process to go any longer than it had to, especially if there was a high chance I'd get the same or a worse deal in the end. Ultimately, the house was refinanced and I got a huge payout from that. I kept the car that we shared, and we split custody down the middle. Child support was going to be a little bit of a headache, but it was better without needing to worry about alimony. I was glad to be done with her, but being apart from my kids half the time was really hard at first. Settling into a new apartment felt so lonely and quiet, and it took a lot of adjusting to. I made sure to move all of my things out of the old house as quickly as possible because I knew her affair partner would move in with her. There wasn't much I could do about it if the court system were going to favor the women 99 times out of 100. I did find joy in my kids coming to my apartment and saying that it was cool. I made sure that we had as much fun as possible when they were around, and I almost never talked about the split or what was going on in the other home. I'd listen if they had anything to say, especially because I wasn't comfortable with her affair partner, Bryce, being around my children. She'd post pictures of them at the park and going out to eat, and it broke my heart to see someone taking my place. But I decided that I was going to lock all those emotions in and not make it anyone else's problem. Things were going smooth until I decided to take the kids to an amusement park along with a coworker of mine and her 2 children. This coworker was very pretty, but there's genuinely nothing going on between us. When I posted a group photo that we all took together, I didn't think that it was going to cause a problem. Marcia responded to it with a plain, simple emoji, and that was weird to me because we basically didn't talk about anything but picking up and dropping off the kids. When I left her on red, since I had no idea what I was meant to say to that, she came back a few hours later and wrote, "Petty much?" I replied, "Huh?" And she asked who that was. I told her that was my coworker, who I mentioned by name, and her response was, "I see. Makes sense why you never told me what she looks like." I'd mentioned this coworker in a lot of workplace stories when we were married, and now she felt like I had intentionally hidden the fact that she was attractive. It seemed like she was getting riled up over nothing, and I refused to let myself get riled up, so I let it go. And again, I left her on red. She was being immature and insecure, thinking I was intentionally posting another woman to make her jealous. But it was fine when she posted family hangouts with the person that she had cheated on me with. Things were fine up until when I went on another play date with my coworker and her kids, since the kids had so much fun the first time around. This time we went to her place for the kids to play video games, and after that, we went out for ice cream. For context, this person has a husband, and he was there when I went to their house. I will admit that when I took videos and pictures, I made sure he didn't show up, because it felt like it'd be fun to push some buttons. I also took pictures when the kids were in the car enjoying the ice cream. The reaction I got from that was pretty intense. "This is getting old, you know." It was funny because it was only the second time I was posting pictures with someone else, and I didn't even tell her it was romantic. She had made the assumption herself. "You're trying to make me jealous, and you're doing a bad job at it." Again, I told her there wasn't anything going on. Everything boiled over about a month later when it was that coworker's birthday. Let's just call her Peggy for the sake of this. I posted a picture that the staff took in the office around a birthday cake, and after that, a picture of just us 2. We were both laughing in the pictures, and admittedly, I could see how that'd make her jealous if she already saw Peggy as a threat, even though she had her own man. That evening, when I got home from work and stepped out of my car, I saw Marcia and Bryce come out from a truck that was parked on the street. It was the same truck he had blocked me off with the other day, but I didn't recognize it earlier. She stood back and he approached me. I couldn't tell what he had done with him, but there was something in his hand and he was keeping it behind his back. That scared me right away. I'm not going to pretend to be macho when it could have been a knife, a gun, or a piece of pipe. I think he could see that I was apprehensive and he capitalized on that. He told me that he understood that I couldn't get over Marcia and that I wasn't fine seeing her happy, but that I had to accept that she had moved on. He said that I was intentionally upsetting her with my posts, despite the fact she acted like she was above it all, and he wasn't going to sit around and let me do that. He said he loved her and he'd fix any problems that I was causing. I told him to back away from me, and he got very belligerent, saying over and over, "Or what? Or what?" I looked over and asked her if she was going to get him in line, because I was certain that she must have known he was taking things too far. But she was just leaning up against his truck and not getting involved. It was at that point that he pointed a piece of metal pipe at me and told me that he was talking to me, not her, so I shouldn't speak to her. I think that was the first point when I realized that this guy was a serious problem. He was clearly getting some kind of rush over trying to intimidate me. I looked at Marcia and asked exactly where the kids were, if they were out here playing like mobsters. It was at that point that he poked me in the chest with the pipe and told me that they were safe and I should stop talking to her. I swiped the pipe away and it looked like he wanted to hit me, but he controlled himself. He said that I had to get the message and stop playing games. Marcia had been mature with everything, and all that was left was for me to act mature too. I didn't feel like I had to explain the situation for him, so I said nothing. He shoved me back with his free hand and started to walk away. Despite the situation, I laughed, which I recognized was very stupid because I was dealing with someone unpredictable. Needless to say, he came back at me, and at that point, he pushed me hard enough that I fell backwards and landed on my butt. He found that funny and pointed the pipe in my face, and it was at that exact moment that I saw a police car pull up. Marcia yelled, "Bryce, stop!" At that point, but by the time he turned around, an officer was getting out of the car and pointing a gun at him. Marcia went hysterical, both at him and the cop. The cop gave him orders and he obeyed them. Marcia kept screaming because of the gun. It was when they told him to lie on his stomach and they got on top of him to cuff him that she lost her crap. The two cops were trying to put him in cuffs, but because of how they had a knee on his back, she tried to pull them off and started getting physical with them. She kept screaming that they were hurting him. It had been a very long time since I had seen her that passionate about anything. Once he was in cuffs, they grabbed her and put her in cuffs too. I later found out that a neighbor had heard the scene and called the cops, which I'm thankful for. They were both going to jail. I declined an EMT since I was fine, but I told him I was certainly going to press charges against him. There were enough cameras in the neighborhood to have captured the scene. I found out that she was charged with obstructing and battery on a law enforcement officer, and he was charged with a bunch of things. It was just then that I learned that he had a record, and that was a major concern if my kids were going to be around him. I'm requesting a change to the custody situation because that episode showed that my ex-wife and her affair partner are definitely not great people for my kids to be around. My lawyer says that I have a very good chance of getting custody to swing a lot more in my way, and that makes me very glad. Everything looks like it'll work out in my favor, and I'm happy about that. She's got the nerve to act like everything's fine after secretly checking out of your marriage for years ago. 7 years together, and she just decides to stop caring, lie to your face, and drag some random affair partner into the mix like it's normal behavior. It's infuriating. And then Bryce shows up at your home like some wannabe action hero with a pipe, thinking he's protecting her honor or whatever delusional fantasy he's living in. Newsflash, dude. You don't get to intimidate someone and act like it's acceptable just because you're sleeping with their spouse. That's not heroic. That's criminal. I can't imagine a more ridiculous, pathetic power duo. Have you ever had to deal with someone thinking intimidation counts as romance? Let us know in the comments. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.